Okay, welcome everyone. Today is Thursday, February 5th. This is the weekly SIG Autoscaling community meeting. We are meeting on behalf of the Kubernetes project and CNCF. Please be kind and respectful to one another and abide by the CNCF code of conduct. And without further ado, I've got the agenda shared here. Hopefully folks can see that. We'll go through this and I'll clean this up later and move it down into the actual organized calendar slot there. But before we get to the agenda, I just want to pause for a moment. If there's anyone that is coming to this meeting for the first time or who has been coming but maybe has been quiet and would like an opportunity to take the mic and introduce themselves, please do that now. Go ahead and unmute yourself and say hi if you'd like.
So I was before on this meeting some time ago, but I haven't been for some time attending it. So I can introduce myself. My name is Paweł Kępka. I'm an active member of SIG Scheduling. I'm working in Google together with I think a few people who usually attend this meeting. I'm currently working on workload aware scheduling support in scheduler, and probably in some time I might want to share with SIG Autoscaling some proposals when it comes to integration of autoscaling in Kube Scheduler.
That's great. Thanks for saying hi, Pavel. Yeah, I think folks here are aware of that. I'm a colleague of Heba's who's heavily involved with that. So really excited to see that progress. I know it's a lot of work in 136 in particular, and there's discussion about pod group and alpha and beta. So exciting times over there. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and burn down the agenda here. So I see John posted some graffiti here. I don't see him here, but I imagine he is trying to share a PSA for a KubeCon EU scheduling and autoscaling summit. There's a registration link. I'll go ahead and click through to that. I'm grateful. Am I able to? There we go. I'm grateful to him for doing that. I've signed up myself. I'll be at the KubeCon. If you're coming to KubeCon EU and if you're in this meeting, I think it's fair to say you are invited. This is going to really, I would imagine, drill down deep into some of the things that Pavel was suggesting with his work in SIG scheduling. So if you can come to this, it's on a Monday at the Google Amsterdam office. So it's in between Maintainer Summit, which is on Sunday, and the beginning of KubeCon on Tuesday. So if you can make it to KubeCon EU at that time, please go ahead and sign up. Any questions on that? All right. Kuba, definitely sign up and go to that.
Yep, I'll be there.
Omer, are you on the meeting in the meeting right now? If not, I'll go ahead and click through to this. So
I don't think so, no.
Okay, cool. So we're in the, another PSA. We're in the last week of enhancements freeze here. Enhancements freeze is on the 11th. If my memory is correct, this link is not working for me. There we go. Okay, I recall vaguely looking at this probably a couple months ago. So I think Omer's just reminding us as SIG Autoscaling tech leads to take a look at this. So that's a reminder to myself as well. So we'll see if we can make sure to not block this KEP. Does anybody have any questions on that? Anyone else tracking that? All right, cool. Okay, so this looks like something with provisioning request. Okay, is this?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Caitlin. The floor is
Hey.
yours. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to bump this PR. I know Michael already looked at it, but yeah, it just adds a new like case for provisioning requests when they find partial capacity. Yeah.
Thanks for bumping it. We have some people internally who are probably the most familiar with the provec logic, so I will raise this PR internally and hopefully find a reviewer.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And maybe just another reminder, if you are out there using provisioning request as a stakeholder, don't be quiet about it. So it doesn't have to just be a GKE thing.
For sure, for sure. If there's anybody from Q on the call, for example, I imagine you would also be familiar and able to review.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to get this stuff working internally, so I've been following Caitlin's PR. But yeah, like I don't have enough power or privileges to give it an approve. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Caitlin. All right, here's one for me. A reminder to myself to continue reviewing this. So this is an update to the KEP for node declared features to graduate to beta. Mike, if you don't mind my calling you out a little bit, I would love for your thoughts on an active thread in there about scale from zero. So really the go ahead, Kuba.
No, sorry. No, don't want to cut you off. We are also discussing this one internally and specifically the scale from zero part because it seems very difficult.
Yeah, so the language that the KEP is trying to land on is that what we want for autoscalers, including cluster autoscaler, is to essentially bypass this new. So no declared features is a new feature where nodes can differentiate themselves within a cluster and support different alpha beta feature gates. And the scheduler can be made aware of those so that, and then that interface is also propagated over to the pod, to the workload definition. And so there can be an affinity between particular pods which require a particular feature gate and the particular nodes in that cluster that are running that feature gate. Does anyone else want to describe it in a better way? Go ahead, Kuba.
I could try. It's like sort of if you imagine labels and node selectors, it's sort of that but implicit without the pod having to specify a given. It needs a given thing. If it uses a given field, for example, imagine pod level resource requests, right? So if a pod is using resource requests at the pod level, it means it needs a node with that specific feature gate enabled. And prior to that KEP, that would all be orchestrated via labels and taints. So this is sort of a plan to handle that automatically. Now, so it has all like very similar concerns to predicting labels or scaling from zero, but it actually seems more difficult. So for example, what the KEP is proposing right now, I don't think that's very viable because that's basically it's proposing that we ignore this one specific filter when scaling from zero. And then, once the node is there, we see what capabilities it has. We know not to try it again. But that essentially means retrying every node group at 0 nodes, every CA restart, which doesn't sound good. And so we've been thinking about a way, like how can we back off a larger class of node groups in a smart way based on like a single node not working. But the problem is that these capabilities, right, they depend both on the cluster minor version, because that determines the default values for the feature gates, user config that overrides these defaults, and then also kubelet config, right? So because like a kubelet can be configured in a way that it doesn't have a given capability. For example, the hardware doesn't have it, right? And specifically that last part is very tricky because there's no like, if given a pod and a node, and knowing that this node didn't work because of this specific filter, we still like don't know what other kinds of nodes we could back off of because they won't work. So we actually had a longer brainstorming session on this today, and we came to a conclusion that this like we need to go back to the drawing board sort of and figure out something else because this sounds not very viable.
Well, I just want to point out the other perspective. So during that conversation, did you confirm with consensus that without any changes in CA that it would, the assumption here is that without any changes in CA that CA will essentially block auto scaling. So it would be more or less like no declared features. We have to call that out in the feature description itself. You can't use this with cluster autoscaler or with Carpenter.
So like I hope we'll be able to either come up with a different solution in time for the freeze or keep it in alpha, because
I see.
I'm not sure if it's a good idea to like a restriction like you just described is pretty restrictive, right? Like autoscaling is very widely used now. So yeah, like there is also a like we could defer all of that to cloud provider, right? And like have cloud providers predetermine what capabilities a given node group will have in some way.
That was what I
right?
suggested on the thread. Yeah, that's why I kind of wanted your thoughts, Mike, to see how how that sounds.
This could be the solution we could align on quickly and for it to be in beta. But then, like, if we do that, right, that sort of pushes the responsibility of where this determining these capabilities is happening out of kubelet anyway, right? So maybe it would be a better idea to steer this proposal so that it's not kubelet doing this logic, but something else. But that's probably like we won't be able to align on time for the.
That's changing the entire. That's changing the entire original cap, I think. So that would be
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are the avenues we've talked about today.
Yeah, and to be clear, if we pushed it off to the cloud provider, it's essentially the same thing because very few cloud providers are going to support it. So it's basically equivalent to saying you can't use this in cluster autoscaler, and Carpenter would be the same.
Well, yeah, it pushes that to the like specific cloud providers, right? And then having to integrate. Like the problem is we haven't like even there is no better solution we've been able to come up with. Like if you have any ideas, or we don't have to do massive retries every time CA restarts, and there's no like because there are solutions that would sometimes result in us completely ignoring some pod because we like back off too much. And like we couldn't find a middle ground where we don't completely starve some pods in some corner cases, but still don't have to retry every node group in the cluster because that could be hundreds.
Well, at some level too, like there might not be a perfect solution. So we have to expose enough configuration so that a user could like, kind of get their autoscaler to do what they want, basically, right? For their specific needs. Anyways, I haven't seen this kept before, but thanks, Jack. I'll put it in my queue.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kuba, for weighing in. I assume Praveen was part of those conversations. He's been driving this, pinged me yesterday. Okay, cool. Okay, let's follow up about a triage meeting. Derek, I think I saw you here. Do you want to go ahead and drive this conversation?
Yeah. Sorry I missed the original conversation, folks. I'm Derek. I'm one of the Carpenter maintainers here. I'm also with Samuka, who's a contributor, and in the AWS team here. I know that there's a conversation about having a SIG-sponsored triage meeting for autoscaling in general, and one of the questions was like, should we rope in Carpenter for that kind of a thing? We discussed this during the Carpenter Working Group, which everyone is encouraged to come in. I will drop a link in the doc if you guys are interested in following along with the Carpenter conversations. I know I see Max here who attends sometimes as well, and Elmiko's there quite frequently. Um, so we have the Carpenter Working Group, which is definitely going to be a separate thing, and then we have the Carpenter Triage. We have the Carpenter, like the AWS team, runs both the upstream Carpenter Triage as well as the Carpenter Provider AWS Triage meeting. I don't know if there are other provider triage meetings that count. I think what you guys were talking about would be only the upstream one, obviously, because it's the actual Kubernetes project. Um, we talked about it. We are interested, especially because the triage meeting has been seeing sometimes has buy-in from external contributors, but frequently um, it's just maintainers or like contributors working at AWS who are like attending those meetings. So I think there's interest in having more eyes on the Carpenter triaging, just because I think there's some issues that are like common between the projects that we're going to need to solve either cohesively or talk about solving cohesively. The main concern that people brought up in the meeting was that we typically do use the full hour, that we use a lot for it for Carpenter issue triages. There's a lot of issues to go through. Um, I don't know how to reconcile those two things, whether or not that's just like moving the scheduling of the Carpenter. I don't know what format you guys were thinking about for the upstream meeting, but that's kind of the context I'm coming in here with.
Great. That's super helpful. Does anybody have any thoughts? I have some thoughts, but I'll pause and see if anyone else wants to hop in. Okay, great. Well, that's great. My default opinion is that there is probably sufficient like low-level context in either Carpenter or Cluster Autoscaler that makes it difficult to be productive if we combine the two. And I would probably prefer to just say something like Carpenter is the model. Let's follow that in Cluster Autoscaler. So Carpenter's sort of ahead of the game, like having that hour slot be dedicated. If you're using that entire hour to do really high value triage, like that's something that's just missing in the Cluster Autoscaler project. So if we combine them, then we would inevitably slow you down. And I think that would be counterproductive. I do love the idea of having some kind of regular, I mean, I don't know what it doesn't have to be a meeting, but we could definitely improve the way that the two projects move forward together and just sort of regularly sanity check and see, oh, you're doing that, we're doing the same thing. Let's get together and solve that. I'm not sure if a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting or something would solve it, but I definitely think it's worth just taking a note that that's a gap that we still have an
We could
opportunity.
have a standing item on the agenda for this meeting even. Like most of the time, we're not filling the full half hour, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the challenge is I think you have to have a sufficient amount of like resolution into it. Like let's say you're coming from Carpenter, in order to like actually capture intersections, you would have to you would probably need the cluster autoscaler project or maintainers to go through a pretty decent amount of detail. Otherwise, you just miss stuff. It would be hard for like say me with my cluster autoscaler hat on to accurately describe in a minute or so the stuff that the Carpenter project might care about, because I don't know what they might care about because I don't have visibility into them. So you kind of like ideally it would be like
That's
one
fair.
person, one cluster autoscaler stakeholder would like observe the Carpenter triage, and then one Carpenter stakeholder would. But that's a lot. Let's maybe crawl before we run. Anyway, I've been blasting everybody with my thoughts. Anyone else have any thoughts to this?
I mean, I thought it would be cool to have a common triage for the SIG, but I think what you're saying about the context switching makes a lot of sense to me. And also, like, what Derek brought up, we also talked about in the Carpenter meeting, which is, yeah, like Carpenter is kind of using the whole hour for their triage, and it would just be like, it would just be kind of, yeah, kind of clashing at that point. I think at the very least, though, whatever calendar we have set up for the SIG, we should make sure that like all these meetings, like the Carpenter meeting is listed on that calendar as well, so people know how to get to it and stuff like that. So even if we don't end up combining them or whatever, you know. And to your point, Jack, about like kind of learning from one another, like I think that's great, but that's probably like someone needs to just take the responsibility of going to those meetings, kind of learning about it, then bringing the knowledge back to the other one, whatever.
Yeah, I know. I actually was doing some housekeeping on my local machine, and I noticed that as the person who runs some of these meetings on Zoom, I get a transcript back that's persisted locally, in addition to the YouTube video that gets uploaded automatically. So we could start right now just figuring out a way to publish a transcript of these so that there could be some async discovery from, between the projects. Is there something similar like that, Derek? And are you using Chime still? Could you
No, we're
easily
on Zoom. I
transcribe?
think we record,
Yeah.
but we could try to get a transcript out of that somehow. I assume if you guys do it through Zoom, we could do it through Zoom.
Yeah, maybe we could bootstrap like a new Google Doc that just describes that, um, documents the transcripts.
We could also try to do a thing with scheduling. I know, is it just going to be Kaz and Carpenter are the two main triages we're talking about, or are we also going to do like other SIG Autoscaling projects? I don't know if any
Well, I
ones
think
that come to mind.
VPA would probably benefit. I know that Adrian and Omer, who are the primary maintainers of VPA, are time zone aligned, and so I think they do a pretty good job between the two of them of moving the project forward. But it doesn't solve there's a benefit to sort of slowing down, to de-optimizing a little bit to allow the public to participate. So that those structured meetings, of course, they're going to de-optimize if it's just a few folks who are working in the same office
Yeah.
at the, but you're going to sacrifice actual public participation. So I'd imagine VPA and HPA could also benefit, but I think CA is the one that has the most need. Would you agree with that,
Yeah.
Kuba? I mean, Kuba is probably biased like me, but
Yeah, I mean, maybe not biased, but I'm pretty far into the node autoscaling side of it, so I just don't have any strong opinions on the workload side.
Because
okay.
like whatever calendar it comes up with, I do like the idea of just like putting a shared calendar out there that's like in the SIG Autoscaling docs that like calls out the Carpenter one, calls out the Kaz one, and then like we can reach out to the VPA folks to see if they want to get their thing added to it as well. And then if there's need for more of a higher integration, and I'll start maybe trying to come to the Kaz ones just out of curiosity. And if folks want to come to the Carpenter one, you're always welcome.
Yeah, cool. And I've been to many Carpenter meetings, and plus one, they're super welcoming. So please go if you have any stake in that, or if you're just curious. One to-do item is we could put links to those just describe the calendar slots above the mast here in this doc. I mean, I think that's like a simple thing that we could definitely do. Like I could do that after this meeting. Kuba, you and I we could figure out a new calendar slot. I don't think I've ever done that, but you've done that. So what I'll take on the task of posting in the Kubernetes Slack SIG Autoscaling channel. I'll just start a doodle or something like that to propose some time slots and get community input, and then we'll hopefully put something on the calendar between now and next week for cluster autoscaler. That is, I don't see Adrian or Omer here, so I'll just CC them on that thread, and if it makes sense to combine CA and VPA, I don't think it does, but we'll see what folks think.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Kuba, do you want to remind us about the annual report? We haven't
Yeah,
done yet.
exactly. So I am bumping the call for action from last week. If you have something, if you worked on something in the past year that you think is worth highlighting, just let us know in any way, either through this doc or via Slack, or open an issue and ping us. Any way you can, it will be helpful. Because we need to at least start a PR. Like next week will be like the final call to at least open the PR. That's it.
All right, cool. Mike, you want to take us back to the 90s where we talk about default MIME types? Let's do it.
Yeah, so I've been trying to test out provisioning requests like locally with just some changes and everything. And I came up with this issue. Maybe if you could click on it, Jack. Like I came across this issue because I was surprised that it wasn't working, right? And I was like, why? Like, and I'm getting these weird, you can see from the issue here, like I try to run it and I'm seeing this weird error about like it's not marshaling, the protobuf marshaling interface cannot be encoded. And I'm like, what is going on here? And so like, Kuba and I had a little back and forth, but I hadn't had a chance to go back and look at it. Well, thankfully, John, one of my teammates, went to look at it, and we set the default MIME type to gRPC. There's a flag, you can see in John's comment there, if you scroll down a little bit, the kube API content type. We default that to protobuf, which I understand like a user can change it now, but I just think that protobuf is probably a non-obvious default for users who are coming to this like from the Kubernetes world. So I realize it would be a big change, but I was
Depends
just
where you work, Mike.
yeah, is there any yeah, it depends where you work. I get it, like I know some places have leaned much more into gRPC and I can totally appreciate that. But I'm just wondering, would there be any appetite for changing the default to JSON instead of protobuf?
I'm like slightly confused. Where is this coming into play? Are these requests coming into CA, coming out of CA?
So, and maybe I could defer to John here, but we set the default type to protobuf, which means that when we create the controllers that are watching for capacity buffer and provisioning request, we're defaulting those controllers to use the protobuf MIME type instead of the JSON MIME type. And then it gets confused because it doesn't, like in my setup, it doesn't know how to marshal these things. There's no gRPC setup. I have nothing configured for that, so it doesn't know how to marshal them. So I think like for a
Right.
default user experience, right? I didn't even know to look for the content type. I would have just expected this to work like any other Kubernetes component, right? Where I turn it on.
Yes, and just to double check, this is CA calling the Kubernetes API, right?
This is CA configuring controllers that listen for
Yeah,
the types. Yeah.
yeah. But they just call watch, I assume,
I
on the
guess. Yeah.
Kubernetes
I haven't, I
API.
haven't dug that deep
Cool.
into it yet, but I was just curious if there would be any appetite for changing the
So
default.
I have to admit I have zero experience in this part.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
this is
sure
why it's
if it's like
confusing though, right? If a user just turns on provisioning request and they expect to use it, and then they create a provisioning request, all of a sudden the cluster autoscaler is like, I can't marshal this. I don't know what's going on. Yeah,
has
John,
this worked
please.
before? Has this worked before though? And then stopped working at some minor or
Presumably it works if you set the kube API content type properly, right? You're like,
So
John, please.
there's an
yeah.
update status call that's in there that is trying to attach something. The client by default, the way it's set up, will try to do protobufs on everything because that's more or less like what it was told to do. And so like there's two things that use CRD types that aren't built-in types, and it's provisioning requests, and there was it capacity buffers. There's a second one. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, because those are the only like CRD things, right? Like that don't have protobufs, like everything else works completely fine. But like if you don't specify in that, like there's other ways to skin this cat, right? You could say, okay, like I'm gonna make like a separate client for these sorts of operations against CRDs and use that and not like change the whole default arc. You could make a specific patch call and that patch call could specifically specify JSON patch type and that would work. Okay, but right now that update status call is using what its client was told is what it needs to negotiate as default, which is protobufs, and then it breaks because it doesn't have a protobuf uh like to fall back on for that type. It can't return it. It's like give me back protobufs, and the API is like I would if I had them, but I don't. So
Do you,
like we
so
need to stop asking somehow.
I assume this isn't the default Kubernetes behavior. Do you happen to know?
Like the cluster autoscaler is explicitly saying, I want protobufs. Okay, like that
Okay.
that
Okay.
core arg that we set, that's the problem, and other people don't do that. They don't say, I want to default to protobufs. All of my clients should use protobufs all the time. Like that's not what anyone else does. I'm assuming this was done for performance reasons a long time ago. Like,
I doubt that. Honestly, I very much doubt that.
It was done. It
Really?
was.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair
I,
enough.
I,
Fair enough.
I think we did it on all the, other API types as well. I remember code changes being done to other controllers. I'm not sure if the default was changing there or if there was just an option, but definitely we're moving from JSON to protobuf purely because of performance. Like JSON is very
Yeah.
expensive to be
But
sent around.
there's no reason to do this across the board, right? Or rather, okay, let me ask another question.
I think
If we did this for performance some time ago, it must have worked, right? So like the big question here is, why did it stop working? Or
well, no, I don't think it ever worked for like, I don't think the provisioning.
So you, Mike, you're just overriding the default.
Well, no, I'm not. Like I didn't change the default. The default is protobuf, right? I should have changed the default to JSON to make it work in my cluster, right? What I'm saying is, I think protobuf is not a good choice for the default. That's what I'm saying.
Daniel, was the performance choice for ProgRex or for just generic cube objects?
Sorry, what was the question? Was it for what?
Was the performance we were trying to optimize with protobufs, was that for like generic Kubernetes objects like nodes and pods, or was that ProgRex specific?
That was for other objects as well. At least I remember those changes being made in GKE, but I think it was actually open source code that was verified.
I see. So it seems like
I think we just followed suit with the with this one.
Well, either the performance is better with it and it makes sense as a default, but we should override these specific calls that are not working with it, or it's not actually improving performance and we should just scrap it and be more in line with the upstream, right?
Well, I mean, I like all the performance stuff and everything like that. It may be a great option to have in there and everything. I think I'm just going with the kind of the expectation of least surprise, right? Like I mean,
it definitely shouldn't be broken by default, but I think we have a way for like specific calls to set the content type, right?
I don't think the expectation when you come to Kubernetes is that you're going to be using gRPC by default, right? The expectation is that everything's marshaled to JSON, So it was just a surprise on my part. And ultimately, this is user error, right? I think Maxim, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but like I didn't notice in the fact that one line where it's like, oh, we should have changed the content type. But again, like it surprised me, right?
I mean, you also shouldn't have to give up the performance in other places just to get these calls to work by switching the whole approach. So I firmly believe that we should fix the ProgRex calls to just use a type they're compatible with. And then I imagine, if I understand correctly, that will solve your problem, even if you haven't noticed this FAQ, right?
Well, yeah, I'll do a little more testing and then maybe I'll put up a PR and we can argue about it more. I guess all I'm asking for is if anyone cares, like it would be fun. It would be nice to like change the default to something that's more widely used in Kubernetes, but I don't want to break people at this point because we already have the default there. So anyways, and yet like Adam, to your question, like protobuf is very different than YAML and JSON marshaling. It's like a binary protocol that needs to be packed through the special, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, but like it should have similar functionality. Like you should be able to express most of the same things.
Right, but
either way, I would just
in order for the protobuf marshaling to happen, you have to have certain records there that can be compiled at the time to make sure the records get compiled properly into the binary format that goes onto the wire. And I think that's ultimately what the complaint is happening in the message there the error message I got is that it doesn't have some way to marshal that stuff.
There's probably a way to make the CRD compatible with it.
That's why I'm sharing this. Yeah.
I wonder not by default.
Well, I'm surprised that. So it would be useful, Kub, if you could like share with us the consumption pattern that GKE is using for provisioning requests, like because I'd be surprised if it wasn't using Proto.
Actually, fun fact from my end, like I'm the developer of CCC, and we've been trying to do the same essentially as the migration essentially for gRPC for CCC, and it's not viable because the gRPC clients are not supported for the CRDs. I may be wrong here, but I remember passing by some issues in the Kubernetes mentioning that. So
I
it
don't
may,
think we do any special things for projects internally. Like we have
I see.
more like classes for them, right? But I don't think we like served or like watch them a different way because
I
we
mean,
just import the open source code for that.
and apologies for cutting in front of you here, Adam, but like this is the whole issue, right? Is that like JSON is a relatively simple wire format that is very, easy for us to kind of debug and everything. gRPC carries all these extra assumptions around it. It's a great format, but like there's extra work that needs to be done to make it work. And I think that's the expectation for users who might turn this on without recognizing that, like I did. They're gonna be like, what is going on here? Anyway,
Oh, I understand what you're asking, Jack. You're asking like why it's working in GKE, I guess.
Yes, but and Moxie seems to be saying that CRDs are just
Yeah,
by design
I'll look
not
into that.
gRPC compatible. So CRDs.
I will look into that. It is very interesting, and I need to engage the project team anyway about the review, so I might as well also ask them.
maybe on GKE they're setting the MIME type to JSON.
Yeah, maybe. I'm starting to think that. Yeah, Adam.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'd encourage caution if you do end up making the switch, because I was working on something recently where we learned that the controller runtime calls to like create an object are different than applying equivalent YAML in like the defaulting behaviors and validation stuff. And so there's a bunch of weird edge cases that I've run into
There is
in this
a
kind of world of
proposal.
trying to use different formats.
Is this like a known issue? Do you have like some refs? Because we do have a proposal out to basically integrate CA with controller runtime. We haven't been using that at all, and with like more CRDs being handled by CA. I think like 3 or 2 weeks ago there was a proposal by Norbert to integrate with this library. So if there's any like gotchas we should be aware of, I would be very grateful for a ref.
I have thoughts on controller runtime. I've had they break their APIs quite regularly, and so it does become like an ongoing maintenance burden to like, oh yeah, we moved this to a different package, and this has a new name now, and this has like a different function signature. So there's one of those like basically every minor version.
Right. Thanks for the context. That might still be an acceptable price for not having to roll like CRD version upgrade on our own, because like there's a lot that control runtime gives us.
Yeah. I'll do a little more testing and maybe come back next week with results or something to see.
And I'll look into how this is set up in GKE.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, fun. We're over. But if someone wanted to talk about something and didn't know how to update the doc, here's your chance. Anyone have any final topics? Great. Thanks, everyone. Great to see everybody.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks.